This week, we welcome Mark Fernandes, Global Chief Technology Officer, Security, Risk, and Governance Solutions from CyberRes, a MicroFocus line of business, to discuss securing the digital value chain. In the leadership and communication section, mastering art and science is imperative for CISOs to be successful. 7 ways to ensure successful cross-team security initiatives. 2 key cybersecurity lawmakers will not seek re-election, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take 1/10 of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more. People require access from anywhere to resources everywhere, but legacy security is ill-equipped for today's hybrid organization. Appgate SDP delivers zero-trust network access for hybrid workforces and workloads, empowering trusted users with secure, frictionless connections to only what they need. Make your attack surface invisible and reduce time to provision by 91% with Appgate SDP, a leader in the 2021 Forrester ZTNA New Wave. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Appgate.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 247, recorded January 24th, 2022. I am your host, Matt Alderman, back in Colorado. Joining remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Welcome, hey, Jason. Matt, what a weekend of football. My Lord, the NFL divisional rounds were insane.
They were. We missed 2 weeks of football playoffs, so we have a lot to catch up on in the news segment.
I know, we do. Let me tell you, this is one of the best NFL seasons I think I've seen in a while. So, if you're a football fan, no matter your camp, I hope you enjoyed football this weekend because it was incredible.
It was. Also joining from the great state of Texas, Mr. Ben Carr.
Happy Monday, Matt. Jason, how's it going today, guys?
Outstanding. Good to see you guys. Monday.
Yeah, it's good to be all back together. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. Join us February 16th to learn about validation techniques within applications. Then join us on March 2nd to learn 5 things you can do to catch more bad guys. To register for these webcasts, visit securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. In his role as Global Chief Technology Officer, Mark Fernandes drives acceleration through a business-centric approach, engaging with CISOs, CIOs, the board, and other executives. Mark comes with over 30 years in cyber, 26 of which were in cyber consulting. As a consultant, he has worked with many global accounts and prospects and has built strong relationships with global system integrators. In his role at Deloitte and Accenture, he served on the global leadership team and helped drive the organizational cyber go-to-market strategy, business growth strategy, and market acceleration. Mark, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here, Matt and Jason. Appreciate it. Looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of shared history to set up the segment. I'm an old school GRC guy. Back in 2003, I started running the third-party vendor management program for National City Bank, and I ended up with this crazy idea that I should build software and competed with Archer for a long time in the space. So we have some common known folks back in those days, Mr. Darbyshire and others. Give us a little bit of background on kind of like your transition through some of the governance, risk, and compliance space, because I think it's really relevant for the conversation we're about ready to have here on Galaxy.
Yeah, Matt, thank you for that. And I think you and I shared a little bit of background, as you mentioned, going back in the heydays of compliance, compliance and risk management in general. So when I started in consulting, it was just when security started to launch from its IT roots, more around IT operations, into true, compliance initially, and then threat management, et cetera. In '94, we were working on an initiative in Kansas, by the way, with Mr. Darbyshire, and the genesis of it was an online platform, really, to help companies map their risk posture with the myriad of regulations that was starting to emerge at that point, and the cost to really keep up with regulations was quite expensive at that time. So, there was some really illuminated people who drove the whole GRC space at that point, really from a genesis of the pain required to keep up with the ongoing regulations.
So let's fast forward almost 30 years, 26 or so. What's changed? It's still pretty expensive, right? And we're still, I don't know that we're doing a much better job of managing risk as a business, are we?
It's interesting that you say that, Matt, because what the regulators have seen is that it's not just having a control matrix view of the regulations, but really addressing the intent for the regulation in the first place. Now, regulators are playing a more active role in providing guidance and providing, in some aspects, a certain amount of oversight. So we're working with a regulator in a different part of the world, and they're playing a much more active role in making sure they don't just look at what the companies are doing in that sector specifically, but they're actually partnering with members in that sector to build more proactive, more repeatable cyber risk management in general.
Yeah. I mean, one of the challenges has been, and we talk about it a lot on the show, is this is a risk management problem. And I think the challenge for most CISOs and most organizations is, how do you take the myriad of threats out there, provide enough contextual information to understand what's relevant to you, and then really make the right business decisions on how to mitigate risk. That is still, I think, a big challenge for organizations, even though the GRC technologies have been out there for tens of years. I mean, we're talking, 15, almost 20 years now since some of the early GRC platforms. So, Mark, what do we have to do to get a better risk management decisioning capability in the hands of business leaders?
Thanks, Matt. And I think, you have had a lot of nuanced experience in this space. So I kind of bow to your expertise in this space. My personal observation is, when we started in cybersecurity, it was more around crossing the chasm from security as a way of solving the CIA, so confidentiality, integrity, and availability of what was an infrastructure transition, all the way to taking a regulatory view, whether it was Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA, name your regulation, to then the evolution of an industry-based view in consulting. So if you're looking at oil and gas, it's verticalizing the capability for oil and gas. Whether you're in banking, you actually just look at GLBA and some of the regulations, it's verticalized. But what we realize is it's much more nuanced than that. So, for example, if you're in oil and gas, you're looking at the example that you and I talked about, the risk at the drilling platform is very different than the risk in downstream operations with the point of sales, like a gas station, et cetera, which have to comply with PCI DSS, which is a retail guidance. So the whole secure the value chain really made its emergence to help understand that digital trust elements from a value chain perspective.
Yeah, I remember working. Oh, go ahead, Jason. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the struggles being a CIO and a CISO for an IT services organization, that organization had 6,000 customers. We were managing to 18 different authority documents, right? And we had our customers assessing us for risk, and then we had to assess all of our partners. for risk, right? And our customers were, we had 35 of the Fortune 100 who we were serving, and they were smart. They were looking at third party, fourth party, fifth party risk, and being able to manage all that was very difficult, right? We had a lot of siloed systems that we had to try to interconnect together. We had a GRC platform, but then we also had integrations into the common controls hub so we could get updates. We had to integrate that into our security operations suite. So that way we had, vulnerabilities and threat information being able to come in. We had it, integrated into our asset management database. So that way we could see vulnerabilities that were hitting our CIs, our configuration items, and our assets. It was difficult and siloed, and it took a lot of management to get that done. And then you have, we talk about this all the time on the show too, how hard it is to have 6,000 customers who have all different forms of vendor risk assessments, right? And some have spreadsheets, some have online tools, and they're requiring us to do that. There's so much bad busy there, that it was a lot of overhead to get that done. So for me, it's about how do we realize economies of scale so we're not spending bad busy filling out spreadsheets, right? Or going to these segregated, siloed online tools and really trying to bring value to the table. It was incredibly difficult to manage that.
Jason, in your kind of view, do you also see automation playing a role in that? Because we are seeing that actually on our side, but just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I guess automation in what form, right? So, for our ability to, show our levels of vulnerability to our customers, yeah, we would have some levels of automation there where we'd be doing remediations and using SOAR technologies there, automations as far as trying to get, we had to build those automations, right? The integrations between all those siloed systems. So that's really where it came to play because our customers were assessing us on our services, right? And we had remote connectivity to their networks because we had to fix them. We had equipment within their network, right? That were our assets, but we're using it to monitor. So, having the ability to assess those and manage those proactively, we had to design that system, in order to be able to show them that we're not sticking vulnerable assets within your network. So that's why we had to make that interconnection between all of these different systems to give them, visibility into the data they wanted to see, to know that we're not going to be a risk to their networks.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a kind of a standardized approach to how you actually push that information, right? I think, Jason, you mentioned it earlier. You said that, you have all these customers that come at you with different requests for security assessments and questionnaires and, how you're handling it. And each one's different. And when that happens, it's not scalable. And so what I've been looking for is more of the approach of providing some type of automated response capability, right? Based upon a standard format or consolidation, and using automation to provide that information and make the updates available. And I'm looking for that same thing, a consolidated way to assess my vendors, right? The scalability issue is just really the thing that's killing us, I think, from an industry perspective.
Yeah. And then how do you marry the same expectation to a customer who has, the perspective of HIPAA versus someone who's DoD looking at CMMC right now, right? That's where we were. So ultimately what we did was we used NIST 853 as our kind of central pillar and mapped every single one of those 18 authority documents back. So that way we had a central control set and we knew where it married in. But that was a lot of work to get that done.
You've developed the Rosetta Stone, right? That's what we're all doing. We
tried our best because it wasn't 100%. Yeah. But 80-20 rule, if we can get 80% of that right, we're in a good spot, right?
Now you see why I'm having this interview conversation, because the next challenge is, as threats evolve and emerge, like, where do you focus your risk activities? Because you've got the Rosetta Stone, but how do those threats then tie into a risk mitigation plan so that you can truly secure the value chain of that particular entity, organization, vertical, whatever? So Mark, I want to go back to this verticalization discussion, right? Is because it's nuanced. It's not just healthcare for the sake of healthcare. My oil and gas example is when I was at RSA Security. I used to work with Royal Dutch Shell, and it was interesting. On the downstream side, right, the oil rigs and getting all the gas and oil out of the ground, they used to tell us, they're like, yeah, unless the risk threshold is like $1 billion, like we don't even think about it as a risk from a business perspective, because they spend so much money in exploration and getting the oil out of the ground that if you don't hit a certain dollar threshold from a risk perspective, they just ignore it, which is way different than midstream or upstream when you're dealing with the gas stations and PCI and all the retail stuff. So that example, just oil and gas alone, shows you potentially 3 different risk postures that an organization would have to manage against.
Matt, completely agree. In fact, the point that Jason mentioned around automation for the UCF, the mapping of different control frameworks is what the likes of Archer and other GRC were meant to solve. And now we, as I mentioned, we're doing some work with the regulator in a different part of the world. They oversee the entire sector. What they've said to us clearly and specifically is they want to use automation to not just see when a control has effectively been distressed in effect, but they actually want to see precursors to the control failing. So the early warning indicators that the control's failing, so they can actually address it more in the early cycle in general. So your point around the value chain, Matt, we've launched an initiative at MicroFocus called Galaxy. It's an initiative to really help CISOs focus on what matters to their business. And if you don't mind, I'll just quickly show. And by the way, this is a complimentary tool. It's available to serve our communities, and anyone can register. Would it make sense for me to quickly just show you just 5 minutes of Galaxy?
Yeah, I think it would be great for people to see it and visualize it, because I've played with it. And back to this point, like, where do I focus activities? I think this is a really great way for CISOs to really kind of focus based on their parameters where they should focus.
Yeah, thanks,
and let me
Matt.
tell you, it was absolute music to my ears to hear the lead measure perspective versus the lag measure strategy, right? Because for us, that's where it's the toughest, is how do we get those lead measures so we're proactive before things fail? I love that. I can't wait to see this.
Because that regulator that we are dealing with says, I don't want to play the role I've got you per se. I actually truly want to secure the sector. So if we can actually do things early enough to identify them and reduce the attack surface or the surface in general, they'll be able to deal with it. Anyway, this platform is available whether you're a MicroFocus customer or not. You can use it. You can integrate it into your workflow. But what Matt was talking about is a clear view on business context. So when you register using your enterprise account, by the way, any personal accounts will be disabled on Sunday, actually 31st, because we're entering context in here for ongoing military campaigns as well. Anyway, so in here you can essentially ask questions around the various business risks, whether your business risk is trusted AI, whether it's IoT, whether it's software delivered networking, whether it's even smart cities. I won't take too much time here, but obviously before we got on the call, we talked about Ukraine, for example. So if you basically hover here, you can actually see that Ukraine, the overall threat condition sits here. It shows the linkage to all the various different operations. You can double click into that and see what other operations are related to the Ukrainian digital threat condition. It is restricted in that you won't really get all the information related to this, but it really is designed to secure the value chain. I can actually say, one thing we saw when I was in the consulting side of managed services is global events change cyber risk. You can essentially ask it questions on global events, like tell me all the things related to Ukraine, Crimea, the French presidential elections, the Lebanese presidential elections, or even things such as the Houthi operations, oil trading value, currency volatility, etc. And it'll show you what risk you need to think about. So anyway, that was just a very brief overview of an asset that's available to anyone. to use and integrate with. And by the way, Matt, to your point, we are working to integrate this into GRC, so it actually sets off a workflow.
Yeah, I think so when I signed up, what it was interesting is I could actually select my industry. So I selected media, I think, because I'm in the media industry now. And you start to see threats that are relevant to the media industry, right? So what the platform allows you to do, which is why I thought it was so interesting, is it really allows you to kind of fine tune based on your business and things that are important to you. Where are the risks to that business? So instead of trying to tackle all the emerging threats across the entire globe, look at what's very specific to you and use that as a way to start to guide decisions about how you want to manage those risks in the business. So that's where I saw a lot of value initially, Mark, when I logged in.
Yeah, Matt, thank you. And I'll connect the dots just real quick to what Jason just mentioned some time back. He talked about the convergence between risk and compliance, and then operations capability. I think, Jason, you mentioned about security operations in general. You know, the four of us have been in that part of the woods in terms of, dealing with the operational reality. And the problem is it's very matrix, right? So you have to deal with your industry vertical, you have to deal with operating risk, and you have to deal with attack surface. So, for example, you not only have to think about HIPAA and the regulatory aspects, you also have to think about securing the whole digital value chain, whether it's online banking or retail banking, whatever the case may be. But then you also have to think about operational risk as well. So you have to think, for example, supply chain issues. You have to think about protecting ERP and HR systems, infiltration of digital assets into the network, et cetera. So all of these converged things we've tried to capture into the thought process in Galaxy. If that makes sense, Matt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I want Jason and Ben here a little, because you guys sit in the chair, right? Yeah. So I'm curious your thoughts about how would something like this help you? Yeah.
I tell you, my gears were spinning, right? Because being able to take that level of telemetry, that's going to help automate. We look at things where, threats are impact, urgency, likelihood, right? Because likelihood matters. And likelihood in my vertical could be different than likelihood in another vertical. But to be able to take that telemetry and then do some level of orchestration. I mean, let's keep it simple, just around identity or geo-blocking, right? If we know that there's some risk out there in the world today from a nation state, could we leverage this telemetry to start on the fly doing geo-blocking, let's say M365 with our Azure Active Directory identity services, right? Now that's where my mind goes is how can I leverage this telemetry and start automating the true security operational remediations that I need?
Yeah, completely agree. Because there's almost like a conversion, Jason, right? Because, there was a state actor that was actually targeting exchange systems, for example.
Yes.
So there's, and those are basically not Office 365, but actually on-prem exchange, which is used in many parts of the world. So that's the operations risk elements of this, right? So
and then as an MSP, how do I take that telemetry and then cascade it down to our customers, right? To start helping them secure their digital real estate.
And it's not static, Jason, right? I mean, that's the problem. This stuff is changing and evolving over time. Yep. And so I think a lot of times we treat those risks as fairly static and we don't revisit them often enough to update that risk matrix to be able to then respond in time to threats.
Yeah. And you're right, because, right now we're seeing much more activity that bypasses attribution. So we talked at the beginning about Ukraine, for example, and you think, there's a specific adversary with known techniques that have been used before. And within consulting, we did a lot of attribution, but now we're seeing proxy activity. So actors that are training other actors to use similar techniques. Mm-hmm. So it's getting a lot more matrix, I guess, right? So.
Yeah, which has always been, we've always looked for a way to respond to this. And the challenge has always been on the attribution side. How do you actually find real attribution that you can trust, right? Yeah. Unless you're putting just a lot of money and resources into it, it becomes really hard. So I think the response and, being able to understand where the threats are coming with this, perspective on the threat and the intelligence is really, really important.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And to Ben's point, this isn't static, which means you guys have to keep all this threat intelligence data updated such that you can see the evolving threat landscape and how that's impacting and evolving the business risk profile for an organization. So, walk us through a little bit, Mark, like what happens, like how often is this data being integrated in? Is it continual? Where is it coming from? Because I think that's a big part of the dynamic nature of this platform.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Matt, because what we've done is we had the proverbial issue around a moving target, right? Because the adversary changes the technique so often, they bring in other innovation. How do you keep up to speed? So one of the things that we're doing within MicroFocus is to look at threat adjacencies. We call them near field, which is if an actor were to actually change their entropy, the way they actually target organizations, where would they go? So not only does Galaxy look at what an actor has done, but also looks at what they do. So, we will provide links, but effectively, if you go to, specific, I'll just share this real quick so people can see it. What we've done is we have actually created a uniform junction. So right now, if you go and use this string, you will always get the latest information about the Ukrainian operations, for example, because we, in this initiative, we updated multiple times a day. We have an entire FAR space capability. So FAR space is basically go outside of your control or influence area. And that's what updates it all the time. Now, some of the stuff is TLP red and TLP amber, so it's not on the platform, but certainly that's how we keep it up to date.
That's awesome. Jason, Ben, any additional questions for Mark before we let him go?
Nope, good to go from my side.
Yeah, no, it was a good overview.
Thank you so much, folks. Sorry.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Yeah, appreciate it, Matt, Jason, Ben. Appreciate it. Been a pleasure. Take care, my folks. Thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to learn more or sign up and try Galaxy for free, please visit securityweekly.com/Galaxy. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.